In a world with artificial intelligence, how do we transform education? Thanks for tuning in. I'm Daniel Lopez, and this is the AI Education Conversation, where we explore the opportunities, risks, and impacts of AI across education. If you'd like to join the conversation, check out the AIeducationconversation.com. Let's jump in. Happy April, everyone. I hope the week has been treating you well. Over the last few weeks, I've had more folks send messages my way asking questions around a general theme, which is beyond more well known use cases like summarization or creating lesson plans. What are some of the more unique AI use cases I've used or I've seen? In today's Essential episode, that's what I'm going to get into. I'd like to share a use case which extends beyond this simple request of a deliverable plus receiving an output and ending the dialogue right there that we might be getting very accustomed to. And by that specifically, I mean, let's talk about the use case of using AI to engage in strategic thinking. I'll be looking to do so in 15 minutes since this is an essentials episode. So if you are interested in a deep dive here or think this topic requires a full episode, send me a message. I'll gauge interest. I'll see if a deep dive is needed here. Before I jump in, wanted to mention a couple of notes here. First and foremost, I wanted to mention that the audience size of the AI education conversation doubled over the last week. Huge thank you to everyone who has supported. You're listening, you're following, you're subscribing, you're rating, sharing episodes with colleagues. All of these actions are free ways to support my work here and to amplify our platform for bigger conversations. And it's very much appreciated. So thank you so much for all of you who have done this. Thank you and welcome also to those of you who are listening to to an episode for the very first time here. As another quick special announcement, Amanda Bickerstaff and the team over at AI for Education have asked me to prepare remarks for the AI for Education Summit taking place in 2 weeks on Saturday, April 27th. If you're hungry for a great day of learning AI in education, whether this is your first time or you're a seasoned AI pro, this is going to be a great opportunity to connect. I will share the link in the episode description and show notes. I've been thinking about my moonshot for AI in education since I started this podcast over a year ago. And I'm really excited to share with you all some of my current best thinking and my vision at this summit for what that could be. Hope to see you then. Amanda and I have also had a conversation a while back. So if you're interested in learning more about her work and the work of AI for education, it's episode 28. All right. That being said, my 15 minutes starts now. Oftentimes, when I'm talking to folks and they use AI, I've noticed that we've gravitated, as I mentioned, towards what I would call these mid-level thinking use cases. Examples of these things would be like creating a deliverable of some sort. Some folks might be asking for to create an essay, create an email, create a lesson plan, create an agenda, create a summary, give us next steps. You get the drill. Those types of mid-level, mid-thinking types of tasks. What I have actually found AI to be very helpful for in my own thinking, and hopefully to push all of our thinking here, is I have personally found that AI has been a really helpful soundboard for me in some of my strategic thinking. Now, when I say strategic thinking, what I really mean here is that AI can help us think more comprehensively around those plans, those projects, those initiatives, and other aims we may be pushing towards. Oftentimes, we engage in strategic thinking and we do so with colleagues, or we may do this individually with some consultancy protocols or things that we have found on various websites that we might use as well. And we might hold space to go through this process. And oftentimes, this may also include processes like brainstorming or pressure testing. But a curiosity that has been very successful in my own work stream that I'd like to expose you all to, slash, you may be doing some of this already, is what happens when you now take some of these work streams that may live in your own individual thinking or with colleagues and you introduce AI into the equation. So let's start to get more specific here. As I said, sometimes I have found myself in actual long dialogue exchanges with tools like ChatGPT, sometimes Claude. And in these long exchanges, what I'm doing is I'm soundboarding some of my ideas, my strategies, decisions that I may be mulling. And based on my own experiences in these moments, as well as an inspiring presentation that I was able to hear at SequoiaCon from Derek Roach, I developed a framework that might be helpful to share with you all and has been tremendously helpful in terms of the pattern that I've noticed I'm engaging in with my own thinking here. Now, this framework that I'm introducing to you all, I do have a full graphic that I'm introducing in my show notes. I will overview this over the episode now. So if you are in a position where you're not driving as you're listening to this episode, you can see the graphic that I'm provided there or in the link in the show notes as well. The framework I'm identifying is called the AAA framework. AAA meaning aim, assess, and anticipate. By this, what I mean specifically when I say aim, really what I mean is what is your aim? This could be the plan, the project, the scenario, the initiative, the objective you're pursuing. Assess. Assess really means the evaluation criteria you'd like to pressure test. And then anticipate really means these are the strategies or the tactics that you might use to respond to the findings that you uncover in your assess phase. Generally, what I have found is in a lot of these dialogue exchanges, I'm going through this AAA framework in one way or another. So I wanted to just introduce this as an organized way you might be able to engage in this type of strategic thinking. If this is something you have yet to do with AI, that might be of interest to you. I'll be sharing the AAA framework in my show notes. And now, if you're not driving, like I said, check it out. If not, that's okay. We are going to go deeper, and I'm going to give a deep example here so that we can all help to contextualize this process. So, what does this look like in practice? Let me give a scenario for what one of my AAA engagements recently looked like to help you get a sense of this. So, first, you can use AI to help you sharpen each one of these phases. So, we would start at the aim, right? You can use AI to help you sharpen your aim, or you can immediately jump to the assess phase if you actually feel pretty good about your way. In terms of ways to sharpen your aim, what this could look like is by asking yourself questions that will help you to gain clarity as to like what it is that you're really trying to do. So these examples of these questions could be things such as specific outcomes I want to achieve, levers I will use to achieve those outcomes, who needs to be involved, how will I measure and evaluate success. You can also use Ask AI to provide feedback on your aim if you feel like it's shaky. I have definitely engaged in experiences sometimes where I might say, "Hey, this is generally a problem I'm noticing. This is what I think we should do. Pressure test this for me. What are you thinking? Or how might you respond to this? What might be some gaps in my thinking here?" That being said, for this specific example, I'm actually already entering into this project knowing what my aim is. So I'd really like to jump into the assess and the anticipate buckets here where I think there's more value in terms of really uncovering this. Generally, when I think of discovering what our aim is, I feel like most of us feel pretty confident in that. So let's jump to the second bucket, which is really the assess. When you are clear on your aim, you can now move towards assess. And this is where I have personally found tremendous value in terms of these long dialogue exchanges with tools like ChatGPT and Claude, like I mentioned. And the nice thing is it really helps you to evaluate and elevate common criteria very quickly. And it gives me additional items to think about as I move towards my aim or towards my anticipate phase, I should say. When I say assess, I mean evaluating your aim across a specific lens or criteria you would like to pressure test. Examples of criteria could be the following: it could be challenges, it could be strengths, it could be resources, it could be stakeholder dynamics, threats, opportunities. It could be alignment to some other specific criteria you might have. If you work for a state entity, if you work for education, it could be specific standards you're trying to evaluate this across. Here's an example of what a prompt entered into a tool like ChatGPT, which explores, assess, and includes your aim, might look like. You are an expert in team leadership and management. My aim is to develop an initiative where our program team collaborates with our partnership team to develop and launch a series of college visits where our high school students have the opportunity to visit our college partners. And this is where we get to the assess phase. List out any challenges which can happen in the development or execution of this plan and assign percentages next to each challenge based on the likelihood that they will happen. So I entered this prompt on ChatGPT as well as on Claude. And on ChatGPT, and I'll include some of the screenshots so that you can see what it entered here. You can see that it provided quite a few challenges here. It actually provided 8. And next to the percentages, it ranked them in order. So essentially, it had communication gaps as the most likely challenge that will come up in this experience. And then it elaborates by saying, by communication gaps, it means miscommunication between teams can lead to misunderstandings about objective logistics responsibilities. Ensuring clear and consistent communication is critical to avoid this. Resource allocation at 35% was the second. It includes a description next to that, very similar to how it did with communication gaps. And then third, it said scheduling conflicts at 30% was what it would have figured to be the third most likely. I did this in Claude as well, just to overlay this. And sometimes I'll do this with this to just to get a more comprehensive view of something I might be thinking about. And very similarly, Claude provided a response. It actually gave me 10 challenges to think about. And the 10, or excuse me, the three most common challenges from Claude's perspective was conflicting schedules at 45%, transportation challenges, and limited resources and personnel. Really, the first two were more logistical facing, but that limited resources and personnel at 35%. It to be more specific there, just in case you were curious about what that meant like I was, the description that it included was that both teams may face resource constraints such as lack of a personnel to handle the additional workload associated with planning and executing college visits. This can lead to overburdening existing staff or comprising other ongoing projects. So that's what it gave me. The nice thing about asking it a question like this is before I'm even entering this project, rather than trying to guess what I think some of the challenges could be or waiting for them to happen in the moment, right? Where I'm going through this project, I try to set a vision for this, and then I launch it. This gives me an opportunity to start to think before they actually happen, what might be the biggest challenges that might arise. And then, as you can imagine, next in the anticipation stage, then I can actually start to proactively respond to the challenges before they actually happen rather than waiting for something to happen. So, when I say anticipate, that's precisely what I mean. It means we take some of the outputs from our assess stage. So, in this case, let's say I wanted to take the 3 most likely challenges according to both of these AI tools. And then let's proactively plan some solutions around that. In the anticipation stage, this is where we can actually start to get tactical, and I think this is where it's gonna feel more familiar to those of you who are using AI frequently, where we are getting into this rotation of asking for a deliverable. This is the stage to maybe ask for a deliverable or ask for questions or ask for something like that. But in the anticipate stage, this is where we can start to get tactical, ask for deliverables, and when some additional examples of things you could ask for in addition to something like a guide might be next steps, questions to think about, or questions to ask your team or some of the stakeholders involved. To the anticipated next step, my next prompt, following up with the prompt that I just provided in that example, was to then go back to Claude and ChatGPT and ask both of the AI tools what the best next step would be to mitigate just the top 3 highest likelihood challenges. And then once I do this, you can see on ChatGPT's response, essentially they're recommending a dosage of a structured communication plan that includes regular meetings, updates, and a shared management tool as the best next step for the communication gaps challenge, as an example. On the Claude end, for the limited resources and personnel challenge it elevated, which was the one that most stood out to me, it recommended steps like exploring resource sharing through bringing in other teams, as an example, conducting a resource assessment, reaching out to volunteers, implementing a strong project plan, or hiring temporary staff. Now, at this point, I think the really exciting piece about just organizing your thinking in this way, right? First, really trying to get clear about the aim that you're going through, then trying to have your evaluation criteria, and then thinking through very tactically ways you might proactively engage with the evaluation that you had through that assess. The exciting piece is you have many options as to where you could go next. You could go back to the assess stage and look at it through a different lens. So let's say now I feel pretty good about some of the challenges on the front end. I have some ideas as to how to proactively respond to the challenges that I think are most likely to come up at this particular phase. Then I could evaluate for some else. So I could say what are some of the strengths of this particular initiative that I wanna absolutely make sure that I leverage? What are some of the opportunities here? Who are some of the stakeholders that I absolutely need to make sure are involved in this project, and in what way, right? So I can go through different levels of thinking to really try to pressure test this for myself to deepen my own thinking before I bring this project to anybody else. The other thing is if I'm unclear at this point about anything that has been asked, I can go deeper, right? So at the just for the purpose of this example, we're not gonna go super deep, but In the event that any of those challenges were unclear to me, I could easily say, when you're saying limited resources and personnel, what do you mean by this? Can you provide some examples into context as to what this looks like? Can you actually give me 10 next steps I could take just for this specific challenges? Right. And so there's so much more back and forth that can happen with each one of those challenges. And that's where the dialogue starts to happen, right? That's where you really begin to engage and deepen your own thinking and really start to think more comprehensively about some of the aims that you're establishing here and really starting to pressure test some of your ideas. So that being said, I hope this framework is helpful. I have found this framework to be helpful in my strategic thinking. At the worst, I think it helps to give me a soundboard to my own thinking internally before engaging with the group. And at the very best, I think it actually generates drafts of deliverables. So, in a world where some of those challenges make a lot of sense, it makes sense for the scope of this project or the plan. I like the next step. I might even go further and say, hey, generate a project plan based on the conversation that we just had that I can use for this project. And in some scenarios, it makes sense to go as far as that. Some senses, it's helping me to pressure test ideas so that my thinking and the way that I'm thinking about this experience when I do have some conversations with folks on my team feels a lot more intentional and thought out versus my initial reaction. I've also found AI to be helpful in using other types of frameworks as well. So if you like the AAA framework and you're curious what other types of things out there exist, I mean, just try doing it in the context of other very well known business frameworks or frameworks that you may have in the context of your sector, whatever that looks like. Examples could be like a SWOT framework or something like that, which considers strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So that's really what I have for today. I did also want to give a special shout out to Derek Roach once again, who inspired this framework through some of his insights at SequoiaCon. Derek, I thought, gave a really thoughtful example of what this looks like in the teacher context. So I'm going to briefly share that as well for any of you all who are still in the classroom as you think through what the AAA framework might be able to look like in the context of being a teacher. The example that Derek had talked about is basically if you're a teacher with AI tools, there exists this really great opportunity to be able to for your upcoming lessons or units, if you already know specifically what skills you're going to be working on, say you're a third grade math teacher and you're about to teach students fractions. The reality is the most common challenges or misconceptions that a student is likely to have when they're first learning fractions is probably only a handful, right? Of like three or four things. So, very similar to the example I just gave in the context of project management, rather than waiting for the student to have that challenge or to have that misconception, why not at the front end using AI proactively plan some guides, some resources that can be used at the front end to debunk what that challenge and that misconception that might happen for students and what that might look like rather than waiting for that to happen. If you have used any AI tools like ChatGPT to do strategic planning, I'd love to learn more about what your workflow looks like. Feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn and let's have a conversation and talk about this. If you're interested in seeing the screenshots that I mentioned and I allude to, as well as the AAA framework overview, sign up for the conversation at the AIeducationconversation.com, where I share all my show notes with my community 12 hours before sharing with my social media networks. If you want to continue supporting the podcast, a rating, a review, share on social media, or a recommendation to a colleague goes a long way in helping us to amplify our space and host bigger conversations. And again, if you have any other thoughts on today's episode, if there's any other use cases you'd like for me to deep dive into, wanted to just give a little sampler today. I know that this is a hectic time as we engage into April, but I think strategic planning is such a great way to engage with this technology that goes beyond just the simple A/B interaction. If you have any other thoughts, again, feel free to message me on LinkedIn. If your school, district, or organization is ready to explore AI and make a change, I am available for workshops and consulting at the AIeducationconversation.com. Humans at the heart of education. I'll see you all next week.